Okay, if you see, government in 1965, government decided to come up with an institution also to handle food security called FCI. This is a logo. Okay, so FCI is nothing but Food Corporation of India. FCI is nothing but Food Corporation of India. So this is the logo of FCI, you can see there. So FCI is Food Corporation of India. So in 1965, we came up with setting up FCI also. Why? Because we understood that continuous droughts, we had to buffer maintenance should be there. Buffer means we wanted to maintain some buffer, extra stock of food grains, so that during drought, during crisis, we can use this buffer stock or extra food grain for handling food security. We cannot depend on other countries during crisis. We cannot handle our hunger needs through schemes like PL 480. Okay, I think it is clear till here. So we cannot handle, and therefore we decided, okay, fine, we have to set up an institution like FCI. So this is how we have come up with institution like FCI or the Food Corporation of India, because we understood that we have to maintain some extra stock called buffer stock. So this is called as buffer stock maintenance. More of buffer, extra stock, so that you can use it during crisis situation. Now the problem is, just because you have, how do you maintain buffer stock? You cannot import and fill the godowns. You cannot import and fill the godowns. You have to increase agricultural output. You have to increase agricultural yield. You have to increase agricultural production. Then only you can fill the godowns. Then only you can give food grains at lesser prices to the needy or to the beneficiaries. So that can happen provided your godowns are filled with food grains. And another important aspect is, in India's case, remember that this FCI institution is a government institution, but this institution is also not efficient. Not efficient. Why it is not efficient is, the food grains are stored in such a way that most of the food grains are thrown out. See, you can see there, you do not have proper storage facilities, and most of the food grains are rotting in the open. Now, food wastage, because of lack of storage facilities in FCI, is one more big issue which has to be handled, which we will look into it. Now, this is also a separate thing. In your syllabus, you have PDS. PDS is Public Distribution System. Okay, so there is this part in our mains called Public Distribution System, where we discuss about FCI in detail. But what you have to observe in our timeline, which we are discussing, is we were not self-sufficient, continuous droughts in 1960s. And because of this continuous drought in 1960s, we could, and also scrapping of PL 480, now we had to become self-sufficient. On one side, our economy was growing at a pace less than expected. I gave you that example, 3%, but our population growth was more than expected. So people see here, okay, more than expected. And therefore, we had to come up with some institution which will maintain some buffer stock, which will try to handle the hunger of the needy sections of the population. But maintenance of buffer will not happen through imports. You have to increase agricultural yield and output. At the same time, the godowns should be efficient enough that you don't waste food. But that was a big problem. You can see here, there is huge amount of food wastage, how they are stored here in gunny bags, and there's rotting of food in the open. Now, this was one more big challenge which FCI had to handle. Okay, so I think till here, the words are clear, the terms are clear, you have understood. Okay, so how do we increase? How do we increase agricultural output? Now, this was something which they were thinking of. To increase agricultural output, what has to be done? Okay, so during that point of time, there was this person called Norman Borlaug, Mexico. Norman Borlaug. Okay, so Norman Borlaug, he was talking about using high yield variety seeds. High yield variety seeds, HYV. Okay, especially with respect to wheat. Okay, now Indian agricultural scientist MS Swaminathan, he is also called as MS Swaminathan is also called as father of first green revolution of India. Now MS Swaminathan lobbied enough to bring first green revolution into India. MS Swaminathan, see, lobbying does not mean always bad. Lobbying can be done even for a good purpose. So MS Swaminathan lobbied enough to bring first green revolution into India. Lobbied enough to bring first green revolution into India. Now, this first green revolution focused on what all aspects? It focused on one, high yield variety seeds. The output has to increase, HYV. It focused on irrigation facilities. It focused on irrigation facilities. It also focused on using chemical fertilizers, irrigation facilities, chemical fertilizers, high yield variety seeds. Now, how do you get these high yield variety seeds, chemical fertilizers? One is government has to give subsidy to farmers. Government has to give subsidy, support. If you don't know the word subsidy, government has to spend some money from its pocket to help the farmers, which I'm using the word called subsidy here. So government has to give some subsidy to farmers on one side. Government has to do that definitely. And also government should take the responsibility to provide agricultural credit. Now I'm using the word here, agricultural credit. I'm writing it here, agricultural credit. Credit means what? Loan. Agriculture, why? Because now the farmer has to go and buy these high yield variety seeds. Okay, and otherwise if government fails to provide loan facilities to farmer, again the farmer will start depending on money lenders. So therefore agricultural credit has become the most important aspect which the government had to focus on from 1960s onwards. Okay, so that means this first green revolution had to focus on ensuring food security by increasing agricultural yield. How will it focus? It focused on using high yield variety seeds, using irrigation facilities, chemical fertilizers. Along with these, the government had to also focus on providing proper agricultural credit to the farmers, providing proper agricultural credit to the farmers. So this was the focus of first green revolution. Now, was this first green revolution successful? There will be always any policy, there will be positives and negatives. Okay, so now if you get into depth of agriculture, I don't know, because you're freshers, and so Modi ji has come up with new farm bills. Okay, that is in newspapers. Now I'm not going to discuss that. It's a basic class. Farm bills. You know that some farmers are protesting, especially these farmers are from Punjab and Haryana. Why are they protesting? There is a different story altogether. That if these bills, because of these bills, the concepts of the minimum support prices, guarantees to the farmers may go. All that is not our job right now. But what you will try to understand is, remember, first green revolution was successful in increasing the agricultural yield. Definitely yes. Okay, so you can see from a grain deficient nation to food security to all. This is what is written here, from a grain deficient nation to food security for all. So India, who was a food importer all these years through PL 480, okay, became a net food exporter. We became a net food exporter. We exported food by the time of 1971. Of course, we did not export a huge amount, but from being a food deficient, food importing country, dependent on a scheme called PL 480, we became a food exporter by 1971, clearly indicating that yes, first green revolution to some extent has ensured in increasing the food security, has ensured in increasing the agricultural yield. So by the time of 1967 plus, now slowly by the time of 1970, our food grain production increased. And since this food grain production increased, now government has two things to do here. One is government wants to stock the buffer in the godowns of FCI. You want to stock the buffer stock. No, once agricultural yield has increased, you want to stock buffer. You want to make you want to store food grains. That is one aspect which government will do. And government wants to distribute. Any of these food grains will be rotting in the open. Now you want to distribute these food grains to the poor people at throwaway prices. So they came up with food for work program. You want to sell food grains, to give food grains to poor people through the ration shop concept. Ration shops concept, you want to give food grains to the poor people. And it is also vote bank politics. You can win your elections saying that we have provided food security to the nation. So either ways, because of increase in agricultural yield, it benefited the government in terms of implementing such programs. Okay, so I think till here, I think the keywords like FCI is the keyword, buffer stock is a keyword. Okay, no complications. Initial 1960s drought. Okay, so that keyword is clear. Food security is another keyword. Capital intensity, labor intensive. Second 5-year plan, we focused on what? Heavy industry. First 5-year plan, agriculture. We were not self-sufficient. We were not self-sufficient. Okay, so that is something which, PL 480, Food for Peace program. This is, we are trying to import food grains from country like US through this scheme called PL 480. That's a keyword there. So I'm talking keywords here, observe. License Raj, jobs, manufacture sector not doing well, contract labor, Zamindari system. All these are some keywords which we have seen till now. I hope you are able to observe the keywords. I hope you are able to observe the keywords. So you're okay. So that is very important. You are in this basics class. You should be in a position to grasp the keywords. Okay, and then subject becomes very, very simple. I can give you 100% guarantee that the subject becomes very easy and simple once you know the words related to economics, and once then you can start reading the newspaper also. See, once you know what is PL 480, food security, ration cards. Now currently what is government talking about? During COVID crisis, now government is talking about protection to migrant laborers. Government is talking about one nation, one ration card. One nation, one ration card. Why? Because now migrant laborers will get affected. They can't go to the ration shops in their towns, and they, for the sake of food security, during lockdowns, during pandemics. So there are policies and discussions now in the newspaper talking about these aspects. So don't worry much about that. That would be a continuation once your basics are clear. Okay, till here. I hope till here. At the end, we will write the keywords. Now don't worry. So just concentrate on our discussion. Okay, so just try to concentrate on our discussion. This is the FCA. Okay, fine. So 1960s, by the time of 1967, now as part of first green revolution, we wanted to also increase or improve agricultural credit. We also wanted to improve agricultural credit. Okay, so how do you increase agricultural credit? Okay, so first of all, banks should be set up in every nook and corner of India. Banks should be set up in every nook and corner, every rural area. You can't travel 15 kilometers to have access to a bank. Now that is the case when the probability of you going to a bank or depending on a bank will be less. So you'll not put your money in the bank. You'll not take loans from a bank like this. And providing agricultural credit to farmers is not possible unless and until you focus on financial inclusion. I'm using a word here. I'm using a word called financial inclusion. One more key word here, financial inclusion. Use the word here. Okay, Modi ji also came up with schemes like Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana. Okay, Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana. And the primary objective of Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana was also financial inclusion only. Now, what is this financial inclusion? It is nothing but spreading of financial services or banking services to every nook and corner of India. Spreading of financial services or banking services to every nook and corner of India. So that is what is financial inclusion. So unless and until you set up banks in every rural area also, you cannot focus on agricultural credit, definitely yes. You cannot focus on industrial credit also in the rural areas. Okay, so in 1969, after the implementation of first Green Revolution only, now government decided to come up with nationalization of banks. Government decided to come up with nationalization of banks. Now, what is this nationalization? See, there are two words here. One is privatization. Privatization means you want to convert a government entity into a private. For example, now you're talking about privatization of Air India. Means you're trying to convert a government entity into a private entity. What is nationalization? You're trying to nationalize. You're trying to convert a private entity into a government entity. That is called as nationalization. Nationalization. You can see a pic there. Okay, so in 1969, 14 top banks are nationalized. In 1969, 14 top banks were nationalized. So nationalization of banks, we're referring to nationalization of banks. So in 1969, 14 top banks were nationalized. And in 1980, another 6 banks were nationalized. 1980, another 6 banks. This is 1969. 1969, this is the newspaper there. 1969, 14 banks were nationalized. Of course, see here, a vital step says Indra. Okay, and 14 top banks, ordinance follows unanimous cabinet decision. Okay, so nationalized banks here, they gave a list. Okay, and 14 banks were nationalized. Now the problem here is, of course, I'm not interested in discussing the other side of the nationalization of banks in the basics class, but the purpose of nationalization is, one is government can have better control on the financial system or the banking system. That means banking regulation can improve. Banking regulation can improve. That is one aspect of it. Another aspect of it is, now if you want to increase financial inclusion, you want to focus on financial inclusion. That means everybody should have a bank account. There should be spreading of banking and financial services to every nook and corner of India. So you want to spread banking and financial services to every nook and corner of India. So that cannot be possible. It's not possible unless and until banks are spread across. Now, government cannot ask private banks specially to go open up their branches in every rural area possible, because private entities have to operate for profit motive. So nationalization of banks, now government can take up decisions to increase the bank branches in every nook and corner or every rural area possible. Now, unlike nationalization, presently what government is doing, observe, presently what Modi ji's government is talking about, Modi ji's government is talking about bank privatization. Observe that, no? So now you are talking about bank privatization, you're talking about merger of banks. But in 1969, they were talking about what? Nationalization of banks. 14 banks were nationalized in 1969 and another 6 were nationalized in 1980. So around 20 banks were nationalized by the time of 1980. So there are many many objectives of bank nationalization, but one of the objective of bank nationalization is financial inclusion. Spreading of banking branches to every nook and corner. So everybody should have access to the banking system to spread financial inclusion. I think this word called financial inclusion is clear for everybody. Till here, I hope everything is clear. I hope you are able to follow. you're able to understand very clearly. Any difficulty? Later on, if you're interested, you can see, okay, was Indira Gandhi madam's right or wrong? Okay, did they give the money, really money was given in cash format to the bank for nationalization? This is out of interest and curiosity, you can read. Or did they give something else? Did banks really like it? Okay, did banks really like it? So like this, out of interest and curiosity. So my objective is to touch the keyword, and you can again go through it. So again in the banking class, we can discuss in detail. So 1969, 14 banks were nationalized. And in 1980, another 6 banks were nationalized. And there were many objectives, but one of the most important objective of nationalization is financial inclusion. Financial inclusion, that is spreading of banking services to every nook and corner of India. Spreading of bank services to every nook. Even today, we know there's a problem of using ATMs and you plastic money, cards, etc. Now, what is the benefit of financial inclusion? If everybody is going to have bank account, there are many benefits. First of all, currently, if you see current government, it is implementing schemes. Any government implements schemes, and there are statistics which clearly show for every 5 rupees spent at the top in India, okay, for every 5 rupees that is spent at the top, only 1 rupee is reaching the beneficiary. Only 1 rupee this fellow will get. Only 1 rupee reaches the beneficiary. In between, you have corruption, you have leakages, etc. Now, if everybody is having bank account and through financial inclusion, obviously there will be benefit. Government can directly credit money into people's account. You can eliminate the intermediaries. Now, this is also, you can call it as direct cash transfer. You can call it as direct cash transfer, where cash can directly move into people's hands. So like our LPG subsidy, currently we are getting LPG subsidy. How are we getting this subsidy? We are paying some money for buying a cylinder, but the money gets recredited, some amount of subsidy into our bank account. So like that, if government has to push subsidy into your bank account, first of all, everybody should be holding bank accounts. So holding bank accounts, or everybody having this bank account, is also nothing but financial inclusion. It will help government to make their schemes efficient. Okay, it will make schemes efficient. Okay, so efficiency is something very, very important. Akshita has written something. Based on the bank's turnover, they considered for nationalization. Okay, fine. We are not discussing what was the criteria taken. Obviously, strong banks were nationalized. Okay, so obviously, strong banks were nationalized. 14 top banks were nationalized. Okay. First of all, what is turnover then? Is the next question. So wait, slowly, step by step. So is turnover same as profit? Like that. So don't get into depth now. Okay. So if you are fresher, please don't get into depth now. Step by step, step by step. Okay. So you have to do it. Okay, fine. So direct cash transfer or schemes can become efficient, where money can be directly credited into people's account. So financial inclusion is nothing but spreading of financial and banking services to every nook and corner, including everybody into the banking system. Everybody should have a bank account. To be very simple, everybody should have a bank account. Okay, so efficiency will increase. Loans, dependence on money lenders should reduce, and multiple benefits are there because of financial inclusion. See, though in 1969, we were talking about financial inclusion, nationalization. Again, in 2015, if the government is talking about Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana, it clearly shows that we did not achieve much with respect to financial inclusion. It clearly shows that we did not achieve much with respect to financial inclusion, because something which we have talked in 1969, the same policies you're again mentioning in 2015, it clearly shows that we did not achieve something called as financial inclusion. And so that is the reason the present government was also talking about Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana. I hope it is clear. Okay, now moving a little forward. Okay, so now till here, that means we have come up from 1947 till 1969. This is what we did till now. And by doing that, we have covered some keywords in economics. We have touched upon keywords in economy by moving from 1947 to 1969. This is what we did till now. Okay, so now in the third 5-year plan, okay, in the third 5-year plan, okay, we wanted to protect our manufacturing. Our manufacturing sector, we believed that India's manufacturing sector was in nascent stage. It's in beginning stages. India's manufacturing sector is in nascent stage. It's in budding stage. Why? Because during the British rule, they created problems not only with respect to our agriculture, they also created problems with respect to our industry. Our industry also was stagnant. So this manufacturing sector was in budding stages. So when our industry or our manufacturing sector was in nascent stage, government wanted to protect this manufacturing sector. Government wanted to protect this manufacturing sector. So how do you protect this manufacturing sector? And one policy which government has taken is import substitution. Now, one more word you can observe here is import substitution. So government decided to protect their manufacturing sector by import substitution. Now, what is this import substitution? You are restricting imports. So what is import? You're buying products from other countries. That is import. What is export? You're selling products to other countries. That is export. So when I'm talking about trade, whenever I'm referring to trade, and when I'm using the word trade, always remember trade deals with two aspects. Trade deals with two aspects. One is export, you selling products to other countries. And another one is import. You are buying products from other countries. That is export and import. As simple as that. Okay. Now, since Indian government wanted to protect our manufacturing sector, which is in nascent stage, in the beginning stages, so nascent stage. So therefore, they decided on policy like import substitution. Now, what is this import substitution? You are trying to substitute imports, or you are trying to restrict imports by coming up with, I think I am coming in the way of this. So I'll show you this diagram. 1 second. Okay, so import substitution, you can see this diagram there. So import substitution means government wants to restrict imports. Government wants to substitute imports through local goods. Government wants to substitute imports by local goods. So here, if you see government, this is government. Government is pulling imports off. Government is restricting imports. Government is restricting imports. Government is pulling back imports. Okay, you have exports here. This is export. Now this is import. Government is trying to pull imports, or government is not interested, or government will try to replace imports with local goods. How can government do that? Okay, how can government do that? So that is what we have to see here. So when there is trade, when I'm using the word trade, remember, okay, so trade has two aspects. One is export is there, another one is import is there. Okay, so trade deals with export and import. Export means we are selling our products to other countries. Okay, import means we are buying products from other countries. We are buying products from other countries. So government wants to restrict imports, push. So how will government do? Government will come up with restrictions or barriers. Government will come up with restrictions or barriers. So those restrictions or barriers are also called as trade barriers. Trade barriers. You're trying to restrict imports, restrict export, or you're trying to restrict the trade. You are trying to put up restrictions. So that is nothing but trade barriers. That is nothing but trade barriers. Okay, so trade deals with export and import. Okay, so now see here, I was talking about import substitution. Okay, trade deals with export and import. Okay, and to protect our manufacturing sector, Indian government came up with the policy of import substitution. So what is import substitution? Substituting with using local goods. Substituting imports with using goods. So that is what is import substitution. Okay, how did we do it? I think this diagram, I don't know how, like I was audible or not. So now if you see this here in this chart, you can see this is the government. So government is trying to pull imports. Government is trying to pull imports. So government is trying to restrict imports here. Government is trying to restrict imports. So that is what is import substitution. Okay, so how will the government restrict imports? That is what we will see here. So when I'm referring to trade, trade deals with, one is export and another one is import. Okay, trade deals with exports and imports. Okay, so government decided to restrict imports, put up restrictions on imports. So this restriction on import was, or government decided to push something called as barriers to restrict imports or to restrict trade. Such kind of barriers called as trade barriers, such kind of barriers of trade barriers. So what is the use of restriction on import? So they wanted to promote local goods. Local goods, that is what they believed. They believed that small manufacturing companies will be there which are producing steel, etc. Small manufacturing companies are producing goods. So if you allow foreign competition, if you are allowing imports, we are not in a position to sustain the competition, and these smaller companies will collapse and die. So to protect these smaller industries which are in nascent stage, in budding stage, you decided to come up with restricting imports, or we decided to come up with something called as trade barriers. Trade barriers. So this barrier to protect the domestic market, to protect the domestic market, to protect the local industries, to protect the local goods, we decided to come up with this model called import substitution. There are positives, but there are more negatives also. So this was the period when China and Southeast Asian nations, they decided to allow imports. They believed in efficiency. When you restrict imports, when competition is not there, we also lost on efficiency. We did not work towards efficiency. We did not work towards efficiency. See, one of the benefit of competition is competition will always increase efficiency. Of course, excessive competition will lead to cheating. That's a different thing. But some amount of competition is always beneficial because it brings in quality. It brings in efficiency. When you restrict, our manufacturing industries did not innovate. Our manufacturing industries did not innovate. There is no innovation with respect to our manufacturing sector. See, what were the cars that were available that time? One was Ambassador, of course, good car only. I'm not saying Ambassador is bad. It's nice, it's unique. Or you had this Fiat. Okay, and we talk about motorcycles. Okay, we had Rajdoot also came in later. Okay, so you had very few. Bajaj Chetak was there. Innovation was very, very limited. Okay, so that is the problem which we had with respect to these restrictions. But at the same time, we decided to protect the micro, small and medium enterprises by restricting imports. So these barriers which we are putting are called as trade barriers. I hope now it is clear. I hope now it is clear. Everybody has understood what is trade barrier.